We are ambassadors for the animal welfare theme, and this is one of many workshops being held, which are being led by Etheria's ambassadors this year. In fact, this is the first, as Irfan said, of a series of 4 workshops, so be sure to tune in to those as they come in the following weeks. And check out some of those being hosted by our fellow ambassadors as well. There's going to be a link set in the chat with more information about those.
Of course, now let us introduce ourselves. My name is Irfan Firuzi, a naturalist, author, and biodiversity advocate who fell in love with the living world long before I learned its scientific names. What began as a child's fascination with beetles and fox tracks in the deserts of the UAE grew into a lifelong mission to reconnect humanity with nature's powers. Today, I'm a Bachelor of Science student at Monash University in Australia, but my classroom has always been the wild itself. From mangrove roots whispering along the Arabian Gulf to the rainforests of Mazandaran, Iran. My journey led me to stages like TEDx Youth, COP28, and the Global Biodiversity Youth Network, and many more, where I speak for the voiceless, plants, pollinators, and the delicate ecosystems that sustains us all. At 16, I founded the Wildlife Focus, a platform bridging science, storytelling, and community action. And soon after that came Nature Talks, a podcast with proof that stories still have the power to change hearts and habits. My book, The Year Earth Changed, were born not from theory but from the field itself, from watching coral polyps grow under moonlight and hearing the silence of birds where they once belonged. My purpose remains simple, of course, to remind every person, every listener, every leader, every reader as well, and dreamer that we are not apart from nature, we are a part of it. At heart, I'm a storyteller of the earth, weaving science with soul, data with wonder, and action with empathy. Through every talk, expedition, and story I share, I carry a single belief that if you can make someone fall in love with a tree, they will fight to save a forest. And beside me, of course, is a dear friend, a voice of the earth, and one of the most inspiring young minds I've ever known. Here is Luca Berardi.
Thank you, Irfan. It's an honor to be here as someone who fell in love with nature way back when and never quite let that fascination go. Hello, my name is Luca Berardi. I'm an advocate for biodiversity and the founder of YRH, Young Animal Rescue Heroes, an organization I started at just 8 years old. A young half Italian, half Kenyan, full of questions and determined to do something, however small, to protect the creatures I fell in love with as a child. That little idea grew into a movement attempting to connect the arts, conservation, and community action. I've lived across 6 countries, in 3 continents, and I've learned that every landscape, from the montane forests of central Kenya to the low-lying countrysides of northern Italy, sings the same song of interdependence. I'm also a singer-songwriter and author. I've hosted children's programs on Kenyan television and written books such as The Breakout, the first chapter of The Adventures of the Loris Brothers, a story about courage and conservation, and spoken on stages from TEDx Youth to global environmental summits. At heart, I too am a storyteller, using music and words to light small fires of awareness in others, especially the young, who will inherit the choices we make today.
Together, of course, we come from two worlds, science and art, logic and Greek, united by one shared truth, that our planet is not a collection of resources, but a living system of relationships.
This workshop isn't just about extinction or statistics, it's about rediscovering wonder, about remembering that each species, each voice is a verse in Earth's long, eternal song.
And of course, over the next hour or so, we'll travel through time, from the first spark of life to the modern crisis that test our courage. We'll meet the survivors of catastrophe, the builders of new worlds, and the silent witnesses of our own era.
And in their stories, perhaps we'll find our own as caretakers, creators, and custodians of the only home we've ever known.
So take a deep breath. Feel the pulse beneath your feet. Welcome to the living planet in motion. A story not of despair, but of awakening. Before we begin, I want you to close your eyes for a moment and imagine Earth not as a rock in space, but as a living, breathing organism. For about 3.8 billion years, this planet has been alive, pulsing, shifting, adopting, and of course, life has continuously emerged, evolved, and vanished.
It may be humbling to realize that extinction is not an accident, but evolution's quiet companion. Every vanished creature marks the boundaries between adaptation and resilience.
And of course, exactly as Dr. David Raup once said, to understand life, we must understand its losses. Around 99.9% of all species that ever existed are gone. Every living thing we see today, from whales to humans, represents a tiny flicker of what once was.
And yet each loss wrote a line in the evolutionary story. Think of it. The Cambrian explosion, the rise of the dinosaurs, the dawn of mammals, and eventually us. Each event was a heartbeat in the long rhythm of the planet.
Of course, when I first walked through the rainforest along the Caspian coast, I felt that rhythm. The air was thick with moisture, snakes slipped under the leaves, and insects shimmered in the lamplight like living jewels. Every sound and, of course, every movement felt like part of an ancient pulse that had never stopped.
That's the same pulse that Darwin felt 2 centuries ago, standing under the humid canopy in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, collecting beetles, some that burned his tongue when he foolishly tried to hold too many at once. He realized life's creativity and its cruelty were inseparable.
He saw what I've often felt, what we have often felt, that evolution is not a straight path, but a symphony of chance and necessity. And sometimes that symphony falls silent.
Extinction isn't new. In fact, there's a natural pace of loss, which scientists call the background rate of extinction.
About 0.1 to 1 extinctions per million species per year. That's the planet's heartbeat. Slow, steady, like the rhythm of waves against the shore.
That rhythm kept ecosystems in balance for hundreds of millions of years. Every loss made room for new arrivals in the eternal dance of disappearance and rebirth.
You can actually read this rhythm in stone. Sedimentary layers act like the pages of the planet's diary, and of course, each stratum whispers stories of adaptation, catastrophe, and renewal.
The Cambrian seas, the Devonian reefs, the Cretaceous forests each had their turn to improvise and experiment.
And of course, when you touch a fossil, for example, do let us know if you have done so and what it is in the chat. Say, I don't know, a trilobite maybe. You're feeling a pulse that once, it beat in a creature's heart 500 million years ago. And when you uncover a fossil of a heart urchin from Beaumaris beaches here in Australia, you are the first person to shine a light on it, yet alone see it, in approximately 5 to 6 million years.
So that inevitably begs the question, what can silence this pulse? Nature has its own ways. Gradual environmental changes, shifting temperatures, hungry predators, new diseases, or catastrophic events like asteroids and volcanic eruptions.
Of course, all these forces sculpt life. Take volcanism, for example, the Earth's breath. It builds continents and then wipes the slates clean. Or for example, genetic drift, the quiet lottery of inheritance that can make or unmake entire species.
It's important to remember nature isn't cruel, nor is it kind. It's simply creative.
Of course, we often think of the indigenous stories from the Pacific Islands. They describe volcanoes not as destroyers, but as mothers, giving birth to new lands. That duality mirrors what we see in evolution, death and birth intertwined.
Over deep time, global temperatures have swung like a pendulum. Ice ages froze oceans and warming periods melted them.
And when the world cooled in the Ordovician, 85% of marine species vanished. Yet when it warmed again, millions of years later, mammals flourished. The Earth is always in motion, reshaping its own ecosystems.
It's a reminder that stability is really an illusion Life has always existed on the precipice of change.
Imagine the continents, of course, not as fixed shapes, but as floating rafts, drifting, colliding, tearing apart. And of course, every shift merges ecosystems and isolates others.
When Earth's last supercontinent, Pangaea, formed, deserts spread. When it broke, oceans filled with new migration and displacement routes, and in turn gave rise to new species, new stories. Movement and isolation, the twin engines of evolution.
Even mountain, building changes everything. The rise of the Himalayas, for example, redirected monsoons, creating both rainforests and in some regions, deserts. The earth itself is a restless artist.
The Siberian traps, the Deccan traps, names that sound mythical, but their impact was very real.
Of course, those eruptions poured out enough lava to cover continents, releasing oceans of carbon dioxide and sulfur. The air itself turned poisonous, and seas turned acidic, and most life vanished.
It's hard to imagine toxic, darkened sky, oceans lifeless, continents trembling. Yet, from those ashes, evolution found a way back.
And then sometimes the destroyer comes from the stars. 66 million years ago, an asteroid struck near what's now the Yucatan Peninsula.
The energy released was equivalent to 10 billion Hiroshima bombs. 75% of species were gone within months.
And of course, but that impact also cleared the stage. Without it, mammals and eventually humans might have never risen.
Even cosmic catastrophes can be a cradle for new beginnings.
The oceans have their own breathing cycle. When warming traps nutrients, oxygen falls and vast dead zones spread.
That's exactly what happened in the Permian and Devonian crisis. Entire seas suffocated, yet from those black waters, new forms evolved.
So, as we got to know now, life always finds cracks to slip through. A coral here, a microbe there. It's never fully defeated.
After each collapse, Earth takes a deep breath and starts again, slowly.
So 5 to 10 million years, sometimes more, before ecosystems rebound, from microbes to plants, then animals, each stage rebuilding complexity.
Extinction isn't nature's reset button. It makes room for new genetic innovations through trial and error.
And of course, like after the dinosaurs, the stage was empty and mammals filled it. Evolution, like art, needs both destruction and creation.
But today, that rhythm is broken.
Exactly. Past extinctions unfolded over millennia. Now species vanish in decades, 10 times faster than the natural baseline. Evolution can't keep up.
Ecosystems collapse before they can adapt. Time, space, stability are all shrinking.
Even if we stop destruction now, full recovery would take millennia. We have accelerated the geological into the political.
We have fundamentally altered the rhythm of the Earth's beating heart.
And so begins a new chapter, the Anthropocene.
Through deep time, 5 moments stand apart when more than half of all species vanished.
The big five, each, of course, reset the planet's trajectory. Each taught us that survival is never guaranteed.
We study them not out of morbid curiosity, but to understand resilience, how ecosystems collapse, and how they heal.
So, as history has shown, catastrophe is both destroyer and teacher.
The first of the big five, the Earth cooled abruptly, ice sheets grew, and sea levels dropped.
85% of marine species gone. Trilobites, brachiopods, reef builders. Yet the survivors, small fish and simple invertebrates, paved the way for future oceans.
It lasted a million years, long enough to erase entire worlds, and yet still short in geological time.
Then came the Devonian. Coral reefs collapsed, oceans suffocated from lack of oxygen.
75% of species lost. But on land, the seeds of resilience sprouted. Amphibians began venturing onto shore.
Of course, from that collapse came our own descended ancestors. The Earth again traded one form of life for another.
And then came the Permian-Triassic extinction, also known as the Great Dying. 96% of marine life and 70% of land vertebrates gone.
Triggered, of course, by massive volcanism in Siberia, a carbon spike, acid rain, oceans turned to poison, it took over 10 million years to recover.
Yet, even in that desolation, tiny survivors clung on, the ancestors of mammals, reptiles, and us.
The world again remade itself through fire, and of course, huge volcanoes provide, provinces. They split Pangaea, releasing floods of lava and gas.
80% of species gone. But the age of dinosaurs dawned, an age which lasted more than 100 million years.
And then the most famous, the asteroid that ended the dinosaurs' reign.
75% of species perished. The earth darkened, fires raged, and ecosystems crashed.
But in that darkness, small warm-blooded mammals found their chance. From them came primates, and from primates, us.
Every extinction has written the next verse of life.
When you compare these events, a pattern emerges. Stress, collapse, recovery. Always the same rhythm, stretched over millions of years.
Each time, ecosystems rebuild, slowly, beautifully, painfully.
But there's a warning in the pattern. Recovery needs time, diversity, and stability. Three things humanity is now taking away.
In the past, extinctions took millions of years to unfold. Today, change happens within a single human lifetime.
We never sit and connect to the spirit of nature, unlike indigenous people. We never usually connect with the land or the food or perhaps the ancestors. We don't value what Earth, humanity, and indeed nature itself went through to bring us to now. The sixth mass extinction is different. It's global, it's of course fast, and it's caused by one species, us.
The question now left isn't whether life will go on. It will. But what kind of life will remain?
For billions of years, extinction was written by volcanoes, shifting continents, and the slow drift of climate. But now the author is different.
For the first time in the history of life, a single species drives extinction on a planetary scale. Us.
Our mark is everywhere. Forests cleared, seas emptied, skies thick with carbon. Change that once took millions of years now unfolds in centuries.
The sixth mass extinction isn't just faster, it's total in its scope. Every ecosystem, oceans, forests, grasslands, polar ice feels the same human impact.
Of course, when Darwin watched, finches on the Galapagos, he saw nature sculpting beaks over millennia. Today, those islands echo with silence. Several species are gone in just decades, the most famous being Lonesome George.
It's as if the evolutionary tempo has shifted from a symphony to a drumbeat of collapse.
The numbers are staggering. The World Wildlife Fund Living Planet Index in 2024 reports a 73% decline in monitored wildlife populations since 1970s.
That's nearly 7 out of 10 animals gone within my parents' lifetime. The IUCN Red List names more than 44,000 species now threatened with extinction.
And the IPBES report warns that up to a million species may vanish in coming decades, not the geological time, but our time.
Imagine a David Attenborough documentary, half empty, coral reefs gray, forests quiet, the soundtrack fading. That's where we stand.
And of course, when you would trek through Borneo some 15 years ago, dawn began with the roar of gibbons. If you returned, there would only be the hum of machines clearing land for palm oil. Silence, where song once lived.
We've remade the planet in our image. Humans and livestock now make up 96% of all mammalian biomass on the planet. Wild mammals, barely 4%.
75% of ice-free land is altered. Two-thirds of the oceans shows human impact. Fishing, shipping, plastic. There is just so much pressures we throw at our planet that it would take us 1 hour to explain them all. There is nowhere truly wild left.
Yet, who knows, maybe future archaeologists will call our layer in the rocks perhaps the plastic stratum.
Yes, a thin, glittering scar making the moment when one species mistook domination for belonging.
Scientists describe 5 engines of this decline. Land and sea use change, overexploitation, climate change, pollution, and invasive species.
Each, of course, feeds the others. Clear a forest and you drive species out. That boosts climate change, which brings new diseases, which spreads extinction further.
It's a feedback loop, an orchestra of unintended consequences.
In indigenous teachings, once again, from the Amazon, they say when you cut the forest, the rainfall gets its way home. Science now shows the same deforestation alters rainfall patterns across continents.
In the Big Five, extinction unfolded over hundreds of thousands of years.
Now it's under 300 years, a thousand-fold acceleration. Evolution simply can't adopt, and of course, it cannot adopt that fast.
Species are trapped in shrinking windows of time. We've turned geological change into breaking news.
Take amphibians, the planet's canaries. 41% are threatened.
Habitat loss, a deadly fungus, shifting climates. It's created the perfect storm. Frogs that once chorused every wet season have now fallen silent.
Their loss repels outwards. Fewer frogs mean more insects, more crop pests, more disease vectors. Every disappearance changes the rule of the game.
I remember reading about a village in Costa Rica where the golden toad was once seen as a spirit messenger. It vanished in the 1980s.
Of course, the most famous coral reefs, too. The rainforests of the sea have lost half their living cover since 1950.
Half. Ocean warming, acidification, pollution, overfishing, each bleaching event more intense than the last.
But of course, corals die, entire ecosystems collapse. Fish, crustaceans, sea turtles, over 1 billion people depend on reefs for food and income.
It's extraordinary, but very tragic. We're erasing the most biodiverse marine habitat on Earth within a single human lifetime.
Of course, I remember when I dove along the reefs in UAE itself some few years ago. Colors blade like stained glass. And of course, when you see videos, of many reefs, such as the Great Barrier Reef, they are now completely white. It of course now feels like diving through snow.
And speaking of canaries in the coal mine, birds, which you can see from maybe behind me, there's an owl I photographed. Birds are our winged storytellers. Despite being one of the most successful groups of organisms around today, 1 in 8 species faces extinction.
The decline mirrors ours. Deforestation, pesticides, and shifting climates. Migratory paths unravel, and of course, wetlands are vanishing.
Living in Europe, we rely on different species of birds' arrivals to herald the changing seasons. Swifts and swallows, aerial acrobats who over their lifetimes spend millions of kilometers soaring and challenging the difficult terrains that they rely on in both their breeding and non-breeding grounds. Now they will arrive late, fewer each year. They're already being impacted here and now.
They carried seeds, pollinated flowers, and fed predators. Losing them isn't just aesthetic, it's ecological amputation.
And then the giants. Since 1900, large mammals have declined by 90%.
90%. Elephants, lions, tigers, symbols of wilderness reduced to relics.
Their loss sends shockwaves through the ecosystems. Without predators, herbivores overgraze, soils erode, river change course.
Of course, I remember I once talked to a community back in Africa, and they mentioned that they followed elephant tracks in Kenya, and of course deep, deliberate impressions on the red earth itself. And each, of course, was a footprint of an ecosystem engineer. Without them, the land itself forgets how to breathe.
Extinction isn't just losing beauty, it's losing balance.
Sometimes species disappear before we even notice, not physically but functionally.
They're still there, but too few are around to play their role, to pollinate, to disperse seeds, or to regulate other organism populations.
A forest, of course, may look green but be ecologically hollow, like a cathedral without its choir.
Exactly. Functional extinction is the quiet erosion before the collapse.
Of course, all ecosystems are entangled, as we have uncovered thus far. Whether it is forests, oceans, freshwater, or soil, cut one thread and the entire tapestry loosens.
Deforestation releases carbon that acidifies oceans, killing corals that once buffered our shorelines. It's a disastrous cascade.
The planet is not a collection of parts, but a single body, and we are its bloodstream.
Let's look closer. Agriculture and urbanization fragment habitats.
Overfishing leaves 34% of fish stocks overexploited. Industrial pollution saturates rivers with nitrogen plastic.
And the climate warming already reaching 1.4 degrees above pre-industrial eras magnifies every pressure.
And of course, as you can see on the screen, these are a few species from my own book that have been unfortunately lost due to human beings. And of course, it's no longer one crisis, but an orchestra, many all playing at once.
And for each famous animal lost here, there are thousands we'll never know.
80% of insect species remain undescribed. Of course, many vanish before they're even named.
Our data bias means we mourn tigers and pandas, but ignore fungi, microbes, and soil life, organisms who we have difficulty sympathizing with simply because they may not be cute, or because they may not have a face at all for us to personify. Yet these unsung engineers are the true foundation of our most important ecosystems.
We can call it, like, I don't know, a burning library before reading its books.
The background rate, remember, was 0.1 to 1 extinction per million species per year.
Today, it's 100 to 1,000 times higher, a thousand-fold drumbeat.
That's more than 1,000 species lost every year forever.
The Earth's tempo has quickened beyond recognition.
Ecosystem collapse means carbon sequestration falters and the climate destabilizes.
Again, I'm going to mention a relationship here. Lose pollinators and crops fail. Oceans die and billions lose their protein sources.
Economists estimate that $125 trillion a year could be lost in ecosystem services, a number so vast it ceases to feel real. Social unrest, migration, disease, what might be first solely ecological in nature, then yields critical social and political impact.
And ethically, we face a mirror. What right do we have, to silence an entire branch of life's tree?
If history teaches anything, it's that life recovers, but only with time.
But we are compressing millions of years of natural loss into decades. The Earth's, it cannot heal at that speed.
Unlike volcanoes or asteroids, we can choose our impact. That's the difference, and that's our burden.
Of course, every decade counts. Each forest lost, each species erased, narrows the window for recovery.
But action still matters. Conservation works, protected areas, rewilding, community leadership. These can slow the tide.
Exactly, and that's hope. Humanity has both the power to destroy and to restore. The question is, which story do we want to tell?
When future generations read the rocks, maybe they'll find not a tombstone, but a turning point.
Of course, when I first began working in, conservation, someone asked me, why count what's gone? Because to count is to care. Measurement turns absence into knowledge, knowledge into action.
Exactly. Quantifying biodiversity loss is how we take the planet's pulse. Without it, we're simply wandering in the dark.
By knowing what's vanishing and where, we can prioritize, protect, and perhaps even restore.
It's the difference between despair and direction.
Of course, as you can see on the screen, there are a few methods here. Method one is fossil records. Our first tool, and it's of course the archives of life. Each layer of rock is a data sheet written in stone.
It gives us a baseline.
But the record is incomplete. Soft-bodied species rarely fossilize. Entire worlds have vanished without a trace.
Yet, even with its gaps, the fossil archive shows us the great impacts, the big five, those massive extinction events, and how life clawed its way back after each collapse.
Today, of course, thanks to technology, we have new tools. The IUCN Red List tracks more than 130,000 species, grading their risk.
Camera traps catch glimpses of rare animals in the night and even manages to make groundbreaking rediscoveries of species lost for decades or even centuries. Methods such as these allow us to peer into worlds which may be most inaccessible to science. eDNA, or environmental DNA, detects life from water or soil samples and can unlock the diversity of a tract of rainforest or grassland simply by reading the remnants of DNA left on blades of grass. Satellites trace the scars of deforestation and melting ice and permit us to take a view of Earth, which often can't be accessed to here on the ground.
In a way, we are still reading the Earth's diary. Only now we use lasers, sensors, and algorithms instead of hammers and chisels.
Each data point is a heartbeat.
Scientists use several metrics to understand loss: extinction rate, population decline, functional extinction, and ecosystem integrity.
Each is a window on a different symptom. Extinction rate tells us how fast species vanish. Population trends show the health of what remains.
Functional extinction reveals when species lose their roles, even if a few species or individuals survive.
And ecosystem integrity, that's the whole body, how well the planet functions as a living system.
Yep, and of course, if we compare the past to the present, the contrast is shocking.
A thousand-fold increase, as we said, from geological heartbeat to heart attack.
But our measurements are, of course, uneven. We know much about mammals and birds, the most charismatic faces.
Yet insects, fungi, and microbes, the builders of ecosystems, are barely studied.
Many regions remain blind spots: tropical forests, deep oceans, mountain cloud zones.
These data deserts hide countless species that may already be gone.
In one Indian valley I visited, of course, locals told me of a blue butterfly that used to appear after the rains. Scientists never recorded it. And of course, they returned a decade later, neither had they nor anyone else.
Let's look at chain reactions. Coral reef collapse leads to fishery decline.
Forest fragmentation reduces carbon storage. Pollinator loss threatens crops. Wetland drainage breaks natural filtration.
Each ecosystem service lost is a thread pulled from the web that sustains us all.
Freshwater species have declined by about 83% since 1970. That's the most rapid drop of all.
Dams, pollution, and invasive species have turned rivers from arteries of life into stagnant scars. Think of the Yangtze River and how our fragmentation of its flow severed a whole branch of the tree of life, and the Yangtze River dolphin or bites disappearance.
And tropical forest vertebrates down 60%. When trees fall, so does soil fertility, rainfall, even local climate.
In the ocean, coral cover down by half. The fish that depend on them follow, and so do the people who depend on life below the waves for food and livelihood.
This is what collapse looks like. It is slow, it is silent, cumulative, and of course, do mention if you have seen any collapse of an ecosystem in your life. It is, as you know it, not a bang, but of course a fading of color and sound.
Our challenge is that biodiversity loss is hardest to measure where it is greatest, in politically unstable, tropical, or remote regions.
Many nations, of course, lack the funding or infrastructure for, long-term studies, and global data isn't standardized. One project counts individuals, another counts habitats, another counts genes.
The unfortunate result is that we end up underestimating the true scale of the loss.
It is, like diagnosing a patient by checking only one organ. The Earth's health demands a whole body scan.
When species vanish, ecosystem services weaken, carbon sequestration drops, water purification falters, soil loses fertility, pollination dwindles.
And as those functions fail, climate change accelerates, triggering more extinctions, a vicious feedback loop.
It's the ecological equivalent of multiple organ failure.
Exactly. If we don't act now, the biosphere could shift into a new slate, one far less hospitable to us.
Current extinction rates are 2 to 3 orders of magnitude above natural levels.
Many species are already functionally extinct, ecosystems tipping into collapse. This isn't a distant threat, it is now.
But data can't show us everything.
Yes, countless species die, unrecorded. Invertebrates, fungi, microbes, invisible, and of course they're uncelebrated, yet essential. When a forest falls silent, it's only, not only, let's say, the missing birds or, insects, it's the vanishing microcosmos beneath our feet.
So, why does all this matter? Why should we care if one frog or one fungus disappears?
Because biodiversity is life's vocabulary. It's the variety of genes, species, and ecosystems, the toolkit that keeps the planet adaptable.
Genes allow adaptation, species shape interactions, and ecosystems create balance.
Chip away that diversity and resilience collapses. Life becomes brittle.
Think of it as a symphony. Each species is an instrument. Lose enough, and the melody simply disintegrates into noise.
Biodiversity gives us everything: food, water, timber, medicine, clothing.
It regulates our climate, our floods, even diseases. It recycles nutrients, forms soil, and gives us beauty, inspiration, and identity.
Of course, economists call these ecosystem services, but we call them gifts.
Provisioning, regulating, supporting, and cultural, 4 pillars of life's generosity.
Without them, civilizations would collapse within decades.
75% of global crops rely on pollinators, bees, bats, butterflies, unseen laborers, which feed billions.
Lose them and we lose fruits, nuts, coffee, or chocolate.
Fisheries too. 3 billion people depend on marine biodiversity for protein, yet overfishing and warming oceans threaten that foundation too.
And genetic diversity in crops and livestock is our shield against disease and drought. Monocultures are like gambling with a single card.
Yet, despite all warnings, we repeat it on a global scale.
Forests and soils are our carbon walls. Together they absorb about a third of our emissions.
Oceans too absorb carbon dioxide and heat, stabilizing the climate.
But as biodiversity wanes, so does the buffering power. Forests, logged, reefs bleached, heathlands burned.
It's a cruel irony, but destroying nature, we weaken our best defense against climate change.
When I walked through a regenerated mangrove in Sri Lanka, I saw carbon capture in action, sea turtles, and many different crabs everywhere. Every root cradled mud rich with life. That forest was working day and night, quietly, without us knowing, protecting us.
Healthy wetlands filter water, preventing floods and disease.
Soil teems with billions of organisms, bacteria, fungi, insects, cycling nutrients that feed crops.
When we strip biodiversity from soil, it turns sterile and dies.
And once soil is gone, civilizations fall. From Mesopotamia to the Mayans, it's the same story written in dust.
Half of modern medicines come from wild species. Aspirin from willow bark, antibiotics from soil fungi, and cancer drugs from marine sponges.
Every extinction closed a laboratory we never explored.
And ecosystem health links directly to our own. The One Health approach recognizes that human, animal, and environmental health are inseparable. Again, like with all things in nature, everything is interconnected.
And of course, very famous and known to all of us is COVID-19. It reminds us that what happens when that balance breaks.
For many cultures, nature isn't just a resource, it's a relationship.
Indigenous peoples from the Arctic to the Amazon see themselves as part of the living web, not above it. Their songs and ceremonies and languages hold ecological knowledge that science is only beginning to quantify.
When species vanish, that knowledge fades too. It's not just biodiversity loss, it's cultural loss.
Of course, my grandfather used to tell me that when the hoopoe bird stopped visiting our garden, drought would follow. Later, as a biologist, I learned that hoopoes migrate earlier in hotter years. His folklore was climate science in disguise.
There's also the question of ethics. Do we value other species only for what they give us?
Or because they have a right to exist simply to be. Every species carries 4 billion years of evolutionary history. That's sacred in its own way.
We are, after all, stewards, not owners.
The earth entrusted us with consciousness, awareness. Perhaps that was never meant as a crown, but a responsibility.
Economists estimated that ecosystem services were worth $125 trillion a year, more than the GDP of every nation combined.
Forests, reefs, farmlands, oceans, all feeding the global economy, lose biodiversity and we risk systemic financial collapse.
Yet we treat these resources or these assets as infinite.
It's like burning your house for warmth and being surprised when winter arrives.
Diverse ecosystems bounce back from shocks. Monocultures shatter.
That's hope. That's resilience, nature's insurance policy.
It's the difference between a forest of many species and a plantation of one. When disease strikes, the former is able to adapt, but the latter can't fight.
Protecting diversity isn't sentiment, it's survival strategy.
I remember last year journeying up to the very north of Sweden, above the Arctic Circle, and seeing this firsthand, how many forests have been turned into effectively biodiverse, poor plantations, rather than the species-rich tigers that the region once knew.
And of course, when we lose forests, we release their stored carbon. When coral reefs die, oceans lose their ability to hold it.
Each feedback loop tightens. Deforestation warms the planet, which kills more forests, which releases more carbon, leaving the Earth gasping for air.
That's why we always say biodiversity loss and climate change must be addressed together. Because biodiversity is the planet's immune system. When it weakens, every other symptom worsens.
And healing requires more than just planting trees. It means restoring the complexity that let those trees talk to fungi and insects and birds.
Yes, forests don't just grow, they communicate. Beneath every footstep is a network of roots, and mycelia trading sugars and warnings. Destroy that network, and you silence an ancient conversation.
Now, at the end, we come to realize Earth isn't just a planet on its own. It is a living, breathing organism. Its waterways are its veins, the oceans and forests are its lungs, and so much more. Scientists call this our safe operating space. 9 planetary boundaries keep Earth stable, as you can see in the slide. Climate, biodiversity, nitrogen and phosphorus, land use, fresh water, ocean acidification, aerosols, chemical pollution, and ozone.
So, once again, we have already crossed several biodiversity loss and nitrogen, climate. Each breach weakens the others.
Think of it as a spider's web. If you tug too hard on one strand, then the whole thing might unravel.
So, once again, everything is intertwined. When biodiversity collapses, climate change accelerates. When land use shifts, freshwater declines. Everything is once again connected.
Everything is connected. We once imagined we could manage each crisis separately. Climate summits here, pollution treaties there, but the Earth negotiates as a whole.
Exactly. You can't bargain with the biosphere, you can only learn to live within it.
Our current trajectory pushes several boundaries beyond recovery. Scientists warn of irreversible tipping points, as they're called. Forests turning into savannas, ice sheets collapsing, and most recently, of course, coral reefs disappearing entirely.
Cross too many, and the planet enters a new state. Not, an apocalypse, for example, but unfamiliar ground where human civilization struggles to survive.
It's unsettling to think we could become fossils studied by future intelligences wondering how we lost control.
Perhaps the tragedy isn't that we changed the Earth, but that we did it without listening. Indigenous knowledge, local wisdom, they have been teaching harmony for millennia.
Yes, in Northern Australia, Aboriginal fire management reduced massive wildfires long before satellites confirmed its effectiveness. Knowledge born of relationship, not extraction.
So we must learn again. That to know the world is to belong to it.
Biodiversity loss amplifies climate change. Land use change reduces water and soil health.
And each of those drivers, it drives hunger, let's say migration, conflict. The boundaries of ecosystems become the boundaries of human security.
When a forest fails in central Congo, rainfall patterns shift as far as the Middle East. When coral reefs bleach, fisheries vanish across the Pacific. And these butterfly effects echo the Earth's singular interconnectedness.
There is no somewhere else. So whoever says that we can go to Mars or a different planet, you can just remove that from your head. The planet is a single household.
If we continue as we are, the economic cost could reach $10 to $100 trillion in lost ecosystem services over the next few decades.
But money doesn't capture the real price. The unraveling of food, water, and climate stability.
Socially, it means displacement and hunger. Ecologically, cascading extinctions. Ethically, the erasure of life's potential.
Of course, we have to keep in mind that history will judge us, not for our technology, but for how we use it, when the biosphere cried for help.
We still do have time, not much, but enough for returning.
Of course, I've had the opportunity to work with Dr. Jane Goodall's Roots and Shoots, and had the opportunity to write to her and meet her. She was a huge beacon of hope. She showcased that hope isn't naive, it's measurable, and where we protect, life rebounds.
Protected areas now cover roughly 17% of land and 8% of our oceans. In many, species are able to return and carbon accumulates and rivers can clear.
For example, restoration projects from Costa Rica's forests to Kenya's mangroves show that when people step back, nature rushes in.
Policy and community matter. Conservation isn't just a science, it's storytelling, it's cooperation, it's trust.
And of course, for example, when villagers in Iran turned poachers into park rangers, leopard numbers rose for the first time in decades. Compassion can be a strategy.
Each success proves that Earth's vitality is waiting for permission to heal. We simply have to let it and give it a helpful push wherever and whenever we can.
So, thus far, we got to know that the biodiversity crisis, the climate crisis, is a whole planet thing. No nation can solve this alone. The air, the water, and genes cross borders daily.
And if you think about it, every culture, every community holds a piece of the solution, from local farmers in one region preserving seeds to governments enforcing protection across country, state, and regional lines.
And I know most of you that have joined us today are, of course, enthusiasts for nature, for the environment. And of course, you all can collaborate with each other, with us, to help with that community, practice and communication. The future demands collective imagination. When we talk about protecting biodiversity, we're really talking about protecting the systems that keep us alive.
Exactly. The word biosphere means sphere of life. It includes us. Saving it is not altruism, it's self-preservation.
And beyond survival lies something deeper, belonging. To act for nature is to remember we are nature.
So where does this leave us?
At crossroads, with knowledge is both burden and gift, life on Earth is under unprecedented pressures. Yet never before have we had such a power to, protect it.
Every action, be it awareness, planting, voting, learning, teaching, shifts that trajectory.
Collaboration with each other, conservation, policy, and individual choice weave the same tapestry. Million drops makes the oceans. So protecting biodiversity is protecting ourselves.
When Charles Darwin returned from the Beagle, his ship, and his great voyage, he wrote that life is endless forms most beautiful.
And of course, as you can see on the screen, it is saying that from so simple a beginning as we've explored, from simple cells, endless forms most beautiful and most wonderful have been and are being evolved. So, these forms still surround us for now. The question is whether the future generations will inherit that beauty or only its memory.
Each of us, everyone here, decides daily what kind of ancestors we wish to be.
Of course, let this hour not end in despair, but in awakening. The story of extinction is finished, but it's not finished right now. The next
And
chapter is
perhaps,
unwritten.
and perhaps together we can ensure it's a story of renewal, of a planet that remembered how to sing. Over the next few workshops, we will slowly learn more about the wonders of this planet, understand the issues, and together connect with nature.
Yep. So till then, thank you for your patience. And don't forget to, of course, follow our journey, collaborate with us, and join our projects, Etherea's projects, Etherea's team, and of course, workshops, or simply contacting us using our links here.
Thank you very much, everyone.